To understand how the American economy collapsed, we first must look at how high it climbed. Coming out of World War I, the United States spent a decade roaring through the 1920s. The economy was expanding rapidly, consumer goods were flying off the shelves, and for many, life felt like one long, non-stop party. People were making absolute fortunes, and the primary engine driving this wealth was the stock market. Seeing prices climb day after day, everyday Americans decided they wanted in. They began taking their hard-earned savings and pouring them directly into Wall Street. This animated diagram shows exactly how dangerous this got. Notice how a tiny, solid foundation of actual cash is supporting a massive, towering structure above it. That upper section represents debt. People were buying on margin, meaning they bought stocks using money they borrowed and didn't actually have. As long as stock prices kept going up, everyone ignored the massive pile of credit teetering right over their heads. But eventually, gravity takes hold. A few nervous investors started looking around and realized stock prices were wildly overvalued. They asked a simple question: what if the market stops growing? That realization triggered mass panic. In October 1929, everyone decided to sell at the same time. The stock market plummeted in an absolute freefall, instantly vaporizing the paper fortunes millions of people thought they had. Beyond the loss of paper wealth, the crash destroyed the public confidence necessary to keep the economy functioning. In an instant, the rampant optimism of the 1920s vanished, replaced by a fear that immediately threatened the structural integrity of every American financial institution. That terror quickly spilled off Wall Street and onto Main Street. Everyday citizens, terrified that their money was no longer safe, rushed to their local banks in massive droves to withdraw whatever cash they had left. But when they got inside, they discovered a devastating reality. Many of these banks had recklessly gambled their depositors' money in the market. The vaults were empty. Over the course of the crisis, half the nation's banks failed, and millions of hardworking families watched their entire life savings disappear overnight. With their savings completely wiped out and surviving banks terrified to lend a single dime, people stopped buying things. Consumer spending essentially froze. The mathematics of this freeze were brutal and immediate. If nobody buys anything, businesses have no revenue. With no revenue, they have to shut their doors. Consequently, national unemployment skyrocketed to 20%. Roughly 15 million workers suddenly found themselves without an income and without a social safety net to catch them.
Families faced violent evictions, and desperate people stood for hours in massive lines just to get a single bowl of thin soup from public charities to keep their children fed. With nowhere else to go, the newly homeless gathered in major cities. They built sprawling makeshift shantytowns, sarcastically nicknamed Hoovervilles, right in the middle of public parks, creating a physical, highly visible monument to the country's poverty. The crash on Wall Street traveled through the banking system to the factory floor, turning a speculative failure into a crisis for anyone with a job or a savings account. As if a collapsed stock market and 15 million unemployed workers weren't enough, nature decided to join in.
A severe drought struck America's agricultural heartland, generating massive, choking clouds of black dust that violently engulfed the region. This environmental catastrophe, known as the Dust Bowl, physically obliterated millions of acres of farmland. Hundreds of thousands of ruined farming families strapped whatever belongings they had left to their cars and fled westward, desperately looking for any work they could find. Desperate to stop the economic bleeding, the federal government tried to force Americans to buy domestic goods. President Herbert Hoover's administration imposed harsh tariffs on foreign imports, hoping to protect American industries. Take a look at this map showing global trade routes. When the U.S. threw up its tariff walls, the plan immediately backfired. Other nations retaliated by throwing up their own tariff walls in response, which completely severed global shipping lines and froze international trade. Still starving for cash, the United States then started aggressively calling in all of its overseas loans. This action instantly transferred America's severe financial strain directly onto struggling European economies. The contagion spread rapidly. Mass unemployment and severe poverty swept across nations like Germany, leaving citizens increasingly desperate and angry as their own economies fractured. By trying to wall off the United States from the rest of the world, Defensive government policies ultimately acted as an accelerant, turning a regional downturn into a collapse of the global economic system. Back in the United States, the public looked to their leadership for help, but President Hoover held firm to a rigid ideological stance. He believed in minimal government intervention, assuming that, if left alone, the free market would eventually self-correct. But markets don't self-correct fast enough when people are starving. The sheer scale of the poverty finally shattered the American public's patience with laissez-faire politics. They demanded action, setting the stage for a highly contentious 1932 election. His challenger was Franklin D. Roosevelt, and he campaigned on a completely different philosophy. FDR promised the New Deal, a massive wave of direct federal intervention designed to actively force the country out of the Depression. Once in office, Roosevelt launched a legislative blitz during his first 100 days. He implemented emergency measures to stabilize the failing banking system and instituted strict new regulations on Wall Street to act as a permanent circuit breaker against future crashes. To combat the massive unemployment, the government deployed sprawling public works projects. By hiring millions of citizens to build national infrastructure, the federal government injected wages back into the pockets of the working class. While the New Deal provided crucial relief that kept millions of families alive, it didn't end the economic drought. Ultimately, it was the industrial mobilization required for World War II that forced factories into overdrive and pulled the global economy out of the gutter. The crisis left a legacy of ruined savings and shuttered banks, but it established the precedent that the federal government is responsible for providing a baseline of economic security when the market fails.